Hi, in this video we are going to talk about rhotic sounds. So, as you can see in the whiteboard, the rhotics are those within this big square here. This is not erotic, this is not erotic, we will talk about them later. But these rhotics here belong to different places of articulation. We have alveolar rhotics, retroflex rhotics, uvular rhotics, even vowel rhotics, or rhotic vowels. And then also they can come in different manners of articulation, such as a trill, a tap or flap, or an approximant. So what is it that rhotics have in common? What is the feature or the characteristic that makes them rhotics? Well, rhotic means something that resembles the sound of R. Any kind of R is a rhotic, and this is actually a label that comes from the name for the Greek letter R, which is rho. It was written like this, so that's why we call them rhotics. But still, so what do they have in common? Because we see that they can be produced in different places of articulation, different manners of articulation. Well, what rhotics have in common is they are all produced with a retraction of the tongue root to produce a secondary constriction in the pharynx. And that's what gives them their special resonance. Laterals also usually have that kind of tongue retraction, but of course laterals also have their own specific anti-resonances because of the laterality. So in some cases laterals and rhotics look very much alike and they button together. They're actually the liquids, but laterals are not rhotics. So for example, this lateral tap here that we covered in a different video about laterals, this is not erotic. Okay. The bilabial trill can't be erotic because of course we're talking about a retraction of the tongue root. So at least for a sound to be considered erotic, it must be a lingual sound. So in this case, for the bilabial trill, this can't be erotic. Okay, so how is this sound here produced actually? This is just a lip vibration. So it sounds like bra, abra, abra, abra. Sometimes if you feel that it's difficult to start the sound, you want to just moisturize your lips a little bit, and then bra, abra, abra, abra. Okay? So the same mechanism for the lip vibration is actually put into practice for all the other trills. The production of a trill depends on the Bernoulli effect. So what's the Bernoulli effect? Bernoulli effect says that when you have an airflow that goes fast through a narrowing, there is a pressure drop within the narrowing. So that produces like a sucking effect, and then like the two articulators come together. So that's actually what happens, for example, in vocal fold vibration. So at the beginning you have your glottis closed, so vocal folds together, and then the air coming from the lungs starts accumulating below the glottis, and it's building a subglottal pressure. So eventually this pressure will open the glottis, and then the air escapes very quickly through the glottis. So that produces the Bernoulli effect. You have a fast airflow through a narrowing, so then there is a pressure drop within the glottis. So it's the intraglottal pressure that goes down. So that means that the folds are sucked together. They come to each other again. So now it's closed again, and then the cycle starts over. So when you have this repetition, that's what makes the vocal folds vibrate. So essentially it's the same here, right? So for the bilabial trill, it's not you moving the lips like it's the air in passing that moves the lips. You just have to make sure that you are bringing your lips together at the beginning for the air pressure buildup to occur in the first place, but then all the rest is just due to the Bernoulli effect. And the same is true for the alveolar trill only, well, in the alveolar place of articulation. So the tongue tip touches the alveolar ridge. There is a firm but gentle contact. You want to make sure that there's no air leakage just from the very beginning. And also the laterals of the tongue must be spread to the laterals of the mouth to make contact with the walls, to keep the air from leaking outside through the laterals. So then you can build all this pressure just behind the place of articulation, and then eventually the tongue tip will yield and the air makes its way out. So that's when the Bernoulli effect takes place, and it's like a spring, right? So the tongue tip is sucked to the alveolar ridge again. So yeah, as I said, it's not you moving the tongue, saying something like da 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 da. It's just the air in passing that moves the tongue. There is a subtle balance or compromise between having this first contact between the tongue tip and the alveolar ridge, and at the same time being lax enough to let the air pass when there's enough pressure behind. So yeah, and it sounds like ra, arra, arra, arra. Okay, and then you also have the uvular trill. So in this case, it's the tongue dorsum, the post dorsum makes a contact with the uvula. Okay, so you have the tongue retraction comes to the uvula here, and then it's the uvula itself that is trilling, right? So the air in passing makes the uvula trill, and it sounds like aha, 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 aha. Okay. Well, then we have the taps or flaps. There is actually a subtle distinction between a tap and a flap, but not everybody makes that distinction. The movement of the tongue in a tap is more direct, is straightforward. So if you're targeting at the alveolar ridge, you just go and back. Whereas in a flap, you just touch in passing. So usually the tongue goes back first, and then when moving forward, it just touches the alveolar ridge. So a tap would go like this, and a flap would go like this. All right. But otherwise, taps and flaps are just a kind of sound that is characteristic for its very, very short duration. So there is a full contact, but just so brief that the air pressure barely builds up behind that closure. So basically, taps and flaps are like stops, like voiced stops, only they're much, much shorter in duration. They have the secondary constriction in the pharynx, so that also makes them sound differently from like a shortened voiced stop that would be produced in the same place of articulation. Alright, so we have the alveolar tap or flap. That's, for example, the sound that we have in English when instead of saying city, you say city, right? So that's the sound here. And then you can have also the retroflex version. So I'll do both series. That would be ra, ara, ara, ar, and this is ra, ara, ara, ara. Okay? Rhotic approximates. And this is like ra, ara, ara, ar, or the retroflex ra, ara, ara, ar. Okay. What's the difference between a retroflex and an alveolar? So basically, in the retroflex, the place of articulation is behind, so it's more posterior. So that gives you a larger resonance cavity in the front of the place of articulation, and that will, of course, give you lower resonances. So if you want to make sure to make this distinction between both kinds of places of articulation, if you want to enhance that distinction, you can also protrude your lips to enlarge the front cavity even more and to lower the resonances even more, right? So this kind of R, as I said, you can usually see there is the visual cue with the lip protrusion, like ra, 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 r. So it's basically very similar to the sound of a W, but it's erotic, which means you are retracting your tongue root to make it sound like an R. But otherwise, it's very similar to the sound of the labiovelar glide, the W that we have seen in another video. And so yeah, basically, as you can see, there are many types of rhotics. We will be talking about the rhotic vowels in a different video when we cover the vowels. And I think that is all.